welcome to another episode of The Greatest Pod, where we discuss and debate what makes something great. I'm Ron Swallow.
I'm Ed Greer.
I'm producer Bill.
Well, I was thinking about our greatest problematic characters. The one that the characters you know their problems, but you would go to bat for them because, damn it, something in them speaks to you. And we're going to examine what that means.
Are we going to be toxic fanboys in this episode? We get our chance to be toxic fanboys?
Woo, role play, baby.
Let's embrace the shittiness, people. Let's do it.
Well, no, I think it's more like looking at, okay, everybody has blind spots, and it's funny that a lot of times they aren't blind spots at all. They're, damn it, I'm gonna like this anyway spots. You know what I mean? Because again, something speaks to us, something is an exact approximation of thoughts we have had. And there's no denying that on some level. So no matter how the winds shift and change, you're steadfast in your like of it. There's things that affect you on that level.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious what this conversation is going to say about each of us, because I think that this could be problematically deep and start to reveal some of our darker sides. So if you're in for that, buckle up, people. It's about to be a ride.
I think it also could reveal some of our darker side, but I think it also could reveal sort of like the crux of who we thought we were or think we are, as either as kids or who we are now. At least I think for mine, it definitely is probably like that. So, but where do we want to start? Do you want to start with Ed, Bill, or me?
I think I want to start with yours because they'll be lighter, and then we'll just dig down into hell with me and Bill's.
Fair enough.
That's
fair enough.
True.
Well, mine is it's characters who are basically mass murderers that we get to like afterwards because they start doing good things. So Vegeta is who comes to mind for the first one. He in Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, he literally blows up planets and kills off entire populations of people so that they can sell the planets they don't blow up. And he's literally killing everybody off the planet so they can sell it to the highest bidder. Like, that's the type of thing that he was involved with. So literally probably billions of people he has at least participated in killing. And now that he fights for the planet Earth to defend it from bullies, we're supposed to like be cool with his redemption story. And the thing is, I totally am. I love I love a character arc. I love that this guy starts off as a bad guy, and I'll admit that in his situation, he was born into this. Like, this is something I think is interesting. Every once in a while, you'll see a hillbilly who stops being a hillbilly once he gets out into the world and meets people. And now the difference is this is a mass murdering hillbilly. So it's that's why it's problematic. You know, you're not going to look at any Mussolini isn't going to show up and then be like, well, now I solved climate change. Is it cool? Are we cool? You know what I mean? Like, it's just one of those things that's interesting about those characters. Loki, I think, is a great example of this. We're supposed to really like Loki. And I do.
I'm just going to say, I mean, what this speaks to, though, is something that's kind of problematic about fiction. And that's, you know, we seldom take everything a character does in the course of a story literally, right? I think what you're connecting to, Ron, is that idea that people deserve a chance to redeem themselves. You like the idea, and I mean, you just got into it, that especially if you're born into a certain culture, a certain mindset, whatever, you deserve the chance to grow out of it and become somebody better. And a story which allows the character to do that, and not only allows it, but rewards them for doing that, is something that you as the audience member or the reader will take on board yourself and be like, you know what? This affirms that I can do that too. And I can, not only can the character do it, but I can change for the better and not only be accepted for it, but celebrated for it, right? Like, I can be embraced for my ability to overcome who I was, which is a great thing, but, and this is, I don't have an answer for this, but it shouldn't always be the case, right? And this is where it gets weird, because like, if you were actually Vegeta, I would argue that the universe does not owe you a second chance. But
No.
I don't, am I wrong? Am I wrong? Are you wrong for connecting to it? I mean, this is what we get into. This is the sticky area of talking about these problematic ideas, because it is a little bit like, I get how you can watch it and like it and connect to it, but then also on an objective level, it is gross.
Well,
Yeah.
it harkens back to stuff like, dude, I wasn't a grown person in the 90s, but I was thinking about it, damn it. And when those Anne Rice movies came out with those vampires that were like super sympathetic and jazz, I was like, I had my first moral outrage. I think I had my first moral outrage. I was like, no, I refuse, you blood-sucking assholes. No way am I going to reward you with any sort of empathy, because no, your whole existence is parasitic and violent. You know what I mean? So like, fuck you. Go hang out in a root cellar right when the sun comes up. Fuck you. I don't care about your feelings. And like you said, Bill, I don't owe you your redemption arc. You ate so many dead people by the middle of the 18th century. You had given up your get out of jail free cards with me, buddy, with all the people you ate. You know,
I mean, it's
so
just like
yeah.
It's like we talked about on the Darth Vader episode. You know, you don't get to redeem your killing with killing more people. Like you just can't do it. And at the same time, I do enjoy Vegeta. I do enjoy Loki. I think Loki, that show was great. I enjoy the idea of a person being able to change. But if that was a real life person, I would want them to be murdered. 100%. Like there isn't a lot of like, for the most part, I'm against, the death penalty. But if you're a mass murderer, or you fuck with kids, or you're a rapist, you can die. And I don't care. I don't care at all. Those are the three things that I don't care if you die. So literally, if Vegeta was here right now, I would love for him to be murdered if that was a reality situation, because I need him to stop murdering people.
Well, it's also down to how these things are written too, because in Loki's case, I think that's a really interesting one, because not only, at this point after the TV series, he's come all the way around to being like a sympathetic underdog hero, right? Yeah. And it was 10 years ago. Like there were scenes where he was meant to evoke Hitler. And so the fact that in a 10-year period of time, they can go from telling an audience, hey, equate this guy with Hitler, to telling an audience to be like, love this guy and root for him in the face of like universal destruction, is kind of a weird feat. And I think it gets down, sorry, Ed, but just last point, I think it gets down to like, if the media is not going to ask you to invest in the lives of the victims, right? If the victims are always just faceless nobodies, they've got a great saying on the TV show Succession, NRPI, no real person involved. So if it's like a low-wage worker, that's how they categorize these specific incidents.
Brutal.
But that's kind of what the Marvel Universe has done with Loki, right? Like anybody that Loki ever affected, not a real person, don't care about them. And it does put you in a weird position as an audience member, because it's like your sympathies are a little bit misplaced.
One of mine, and it's been with me since forever, and it's really just spread across the 80s across so many different characters. But I'll save my headliner character. But the first one that honestly probably got me into the second one was damn Rambo. When I was a kid, Rambo was like Daniel Boone for kids in the 50s or whatever the fuck, or Davy Crockett. You know what I'm saying? It was like this legendary figure with a signature piece of headgear and a signature tool. And that's what they sell to kids at any given time in the continental United States. And my generation had, when I was a kid, Rambo. And Rambo won whole wars by himself. Rambo got pushed by the establishment as well, though he wasn't a regular good guy, because even the cops didn't like him in that first movie.
Mhm.
He's an anti-establishment Republican figurehead of war and doom that I bought into hook, line, and sinker. And to this day, I could put on any of the first two movies. I can't rock with him fighting with the damn Mujahideen and stuff in the third one. That's just the dissonance is too great. But it's also a great time capsule in and of itself. I watched that movie in the theaters, I think, as a kid, rooting for a
Mhm.
homeboy.
That's an interesting one too, because that first Rambo movie is so different than what the series became, and even what the character became. Right? Like initially, Rambo was a little bit of a commentary on PTSD, and
Mm-hmm.
and very much a commentary on sort of the overreach of like provincial small town law enforcement, and just that troubled relationship between vets and the world back home. Like it had a lot of sort of sober and interesting things on its mind, but eventually, they realized that the audience really wanted to see a
Mm-hmm.
one man American army murdering foreigners. And Rambo fit
Mm-hmm.
that bill.
Dude, and check it out. And it was so beautiful because it was like edging the audience with that first movie. That first movie was like, ooh, look at this killer. He could have killed all these guys. One guy did die trying to fuck with Rambo. Rambo wasn't trying to fuck with him. He fell out of a helicopter trying to shoot Rambo. That's his one casualty. When you look at the could have be casualties, he could have murked all of them. And there's several scenes in there where he tells them such. Like, I could totally have murked the hell out of you. You had no idea I was here, bro. I'm playing a different game than you with this espionage shit, dude. So get the fuck out of my woods and leave me alone, dog. And so when you get this kicked puppy of a character, and then they go to the Rambo Part 2 story by James Cameron, spruced up by Sylvester Stallone on the screenplay. That's one thing I was going to say. David Morrell wrote the book, and the remnants of his treatise on PTSD kept the first Rambo movie a human story exploring real themes.
Yeah.
But as soon as the big boys got a hold of it, Stallone was like, "Yeah, thanks, buddy. Thank you for this thing," and got a little story by James Cameron and he spruced it up, and you get this. If the first one was edging, this one is an explosive tsunami of violence, and
Uh-huh.
you get your release.
This
And it
is the
was the
money shot.
biggest shit. It was the yes, it was the
All
biggest
over.
shit. Dude, people don't remember. I remember being in Boy Scouts and having a Rambo knife. It had a damn compartment in the handle that you could put fishing line and all types of matches and survival shit in there. And it was sharp as hell. I kept it hella sharp on a rock, and I had a holster for it and everything. And I just felt like such a big man because I felt like Rambo. And it's now I'm just looking back on it. I'm just like the cringe. I don't like that word, but it hits me. The cringe hits me when I think about how into fucking Rambo I was as a kid.
Listen, I don't want to put anybody on blast, but that strikes me as being very similar to that picture that is recently making the rounds again on the internet of a young Ben Shapiro in a cut off trench coat with a giant katana sword. And like, listen, especially nerds, I think we can all relate to that phase in our lives where
Mhm.
it's like, yeah, I just want to believe that I am the baddest motherfucker anybody will ever come across. And
Mhm.
look at my sweet weapons. And I don't care who you are. If you fuck with me, I'm taking you down, motherfucker. And it's like, it'd be nice if we didn't feel that way, but why do we all feel that way at some point? You know what I mean? Like, it's so weird.
Especially dudes, you know what I mean? Because like there's so many. Obviously, everybody gets bullied in different ways. You know what I mean? But I just think guys, and I think definitely young women are beat up physically by other young women and people and stuff and abuse and all this stuff. But as a male, you kind of know that you're going to get punched and insulted. It's like part of the deal. Punches and insults. That's your
Yep.
basic package as a young boy. So like that combo, it's like people will insult you and hit you. You have to get developed on both fronts. You know what I'm saying? You got to get your mental bully and your physical bully repellent on. So all these characters are just catnip for people who are in that state of duress, trying to think of, I gotta come up with a snappy line for Tyrone, and I gotta punch Nathan in his neck because that dude literally, you know what I mean? Like the kid who's doing that calculus cracks open a DVD case or whatever, and can put in Rambo, can put in any of these characters. John Wick is filling that hole pretty good right now. John Wick is going at it like John Holmes. You talk about filling a hole, you know what I mean? John Wick is doing it.
And I don't want to steal a character that you're about to talk about, but it's appropriate because it's part of a story. When I was a kid, I was friends with this dude who ended up basically being crazy and eventually going to jail, which a lot of people in New Mexico do. So just get used to it. That's just a thing that happens in New Mexico. And this guy, I remember we were super into The Punisher, and he decided he was going to take out gangs. And so he decided that he was going to hide a cache of like knives in a sewer. In New Mexico, there's a bunch of big sewers that you can go into. You can just walk in them because there's also no water, but they have a sewer system. There's ditches with big ass tunnels and stuff, and you just hid some things. And we had a password. We had to yell toot toot as we're coming into the sewer so that he knew that you were coming in. It was just insane. And that's when the Punisher is bad.
Yeah.
Toot toot indeed.
Toot toot. Toot toot. Toot toot. I don't look, if anybody is in the sewer, I should just be making noise just in case some crazy person's in the sewer. In New Mexico, you never know. Sewer people, who knows?
Here's the thing, though, man. Like, the thing that I'm baffled by is just the fact that we kind of all go through that phase regardless of our circumstances.
Yeah.
And I know when I was a kid, and I'm talking like pre-10, right? Like I'm 7, 8, 9 years old, and probably not all the way in on comics, but I am all the way in on superheroes. And it's mostly due to like cartoons and movies, right? And I was a kid who loved Batman, like had the whole dress up set from the Michael Keaton era, you know, mask, chest plate, cape, like boot covers, this whole thing. Would love dressing up like it. And I got to tell you, like, I actually connected to that idea of like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to find people who are doing shit that they shouldn't be doing. And I'm going to teach them what for, you know what I mean? And I don't know if it's the same thing your friend went through with gangs, but just that weird power trip of like, I'm going to put on this mask and I'm going to go fucking beat up people that are doing shit I don't like was just the thing. And I don't know if that's learned. I don't know if that's unavoidable or whatever. And Batman, I think, ties into my preferred problematic character type, which is the disaffected, privileged white guy who nevertheless wants to kill himself. I know that that's problematic as hell. I will just put that right into my veins. I will take that story all day long, and it probably says a lot about me. But when we started talking about this topic, the one that came to mind is Lester Burnham from American Beauty, Kevin Spacey in American Beauty.
Yes.
So problematic on every possible level. Yep. Right? Like this guy is a shit father and a shit husband and as entitled as hell and just wants the world to revolve around him and acts petulant when it doesn't. And then almost has sex with an underage girl, right? Everything about that is problematic. And I will say so unequivocally. And yet I love that character and I love that story. And don't tell me not to. And here's what it is. And I hope that this rings a bell for somebody listening, because I do believe that no matter how much privilege you are born into, you still end up running up against the inescapable and true fact that life is meaningless and we're all doomed to die. And this is my thing.
I don't know why I think that's funny.
But I think art does a huge disservice when it runs away from that. And like, I am here for all of the stories about underprivileged people and people going through real everyday struggles that make their lives much harder than it should be. Those stories need to be told. It's important, and they're good stories most of the time. That said, I think there's a certain sense of art sticking its head in the sand if it doesn't acknowledge that at the end of all those struggles, at the end of all those existential struggles for justice and acceptance and equality, there is still this problem, right? There is still this problem of ennui, of malaise, of there is no reason to live really in an objective sense. And it's something I certainly struggle with. I don't say struggle like I'm over here thinking about killing myself, but to me, that is the ultimate question, is how do you reconcile that problem? And any art which wants to tackle that head on, like I said, put it right in my veins, because to me, that is the most salient problem of existence. And I want it to be talked about as often and as much as possible.
I mean, it can be talked about on multiple levels too. I mean, from this, non-privileged people feel that way as well, so there can be just as many great stories about that. And you also see something like, people always love to use Robin Williams as a great example of this, and I think it is a great example because that he seems like he had it all. He had millions of dollars. He's considered one of the greatest comedians of all time, one of the best actors and comedic actors of all time. He's made great movies, great success. Everyone would seem to think he makes people laugh. He seems happy, and he wasn't.
Yeah.
And what more can and if that guy can't be happy, it is a story to say, if that guy can't be happy, how can any of us be happy?
Well, but it's also about like the responsibility. I think that the thing about the movie that Bill's talking about is like, there are people who have this responsibility to do all this jazz, and by nature of that responsibility, they don't really get too much credit for it. It's like as the great Chris Rock said, you're supposed to take care of your kids, but guess what? Having a lady for 20 years and raising kids with her is a task for both of you. I'm saying for both of you, but it is a task for both of you. And especially if you're the person who's like literally putting the bacon on the table as far as money, and you're just sort of just like, that's just sort of your job, loser. And you're just going through life, and then you start realizing that you missed. I think that character realizes that he missed some sort of window, and that's the midlife crisis jazz. Midlife crisis hits dudes hard. That's where you get these old ass men in their Camaros and stuff. But as Bill Burr said, when else am I supposed to afford this car? When was I supposed to afford this super dope car? When I was 16, flipping burgers? You know what I'm saying? What the hell are you talking about? So yes, I'm gonna be an old man in a dope ass car, but you understand what I'm saying?
That's what, but that's what I'm saying too, Ed, is it's like, it's sort of anything that addresses sort of the fundamental absurdity of life. And I don't think it's super revelatory to say like, yeah, life works backwards. You spend all of your most physically capable, vital years struggling for things that by the time you get them, you can't enjoy the same way that you should have 20 years previously. And like, that just is, again, that's not a big revelation, but that is just one of those things about life that you don't really have an answer for. It's just like, why does it work this way? And you can't help but just sort of shake your fist at the heavens. And I just think that sort of omni-universal experience for me is just always sort of vital to explore in storytelling. That thing that like underneath everything that creates problems for people in life, and there are plenty of other things, but even underneath it all, we still have to all exist in a world that is fundamentally sort of broken and unfair. And I don't know, again, I'm acknowledging it's problematic because it's like it essentially is just ignoring way more present and immediate suffering in the world to just deal with this ennui. But as someone who struggles with that ennui, I just like to see it represented.
and I would argue that it is pretty well represented. It's just one of those things that like it continuously finds a way to justify itself. because of the fact that so many people feel it of all stripes. You know what I mean? Because I think there's not too many people who watch like a really well rendered one of those movies and goes, man, if I had this house, I'd shut the fuck up. they'll say that dude's messed up. That dude has a real problem that I can relate to a lot of the times in a well rendered one of those movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do find myself looking at people's floors and sconces and shit though in movies. Sometimes I'm just like, damn, that's a dapper ass crib for all this tragedy. I do see it sometimes, but it's mostly in the lesser efforts, the ones that aren't enthralling me dramatically. I'll notice something like that. But
it is interesting how you can do that in art and you can't do that in real life. Like if I hear another rich person be like, well, money doesn't solve all your problems, I'll be like, I'll stab you. I will stab you. I'll go down to the sewer. I'll yell toot toot. I'll get that sword and I will chop your arm off because money solves 75% of my problems, if not 80% of my problems. It at least allows me to address my other problems. So shut the fuck up. In real life, that's how I feel. But in a movie, I don't think about that at all.
It's a little bit like ignoring the genocide so you can appreciate the redemption arc, you know? You ignore all the privilege so you can appreciate the depression.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I don't want to get too, I know we go political from time to time, and this shouldn't even be political, but it's political now. I normally don't like the idea that cinema affects, and media in general affects how we all as people behave and believe in things. Like I try not to, with the people who are like Marilyn Manson caused.
Right.
Yeah, I hate that shit, and I hate it most of the time. But I do think it's interesting that the numbers of deaths for COVID are so big and unfathomable that some people don't seem to care. And I wonder if there is some kind of connection to that. I don't like to believe there is because, it seems like it should be ridiculous, but there's a lot of people who are like, it's only 1% of people who are dying. Yes, but almost it's 4 million people who died around the world, man. That's a big deal, and we should be making a big deal out of it. But people are like, it's not a big deal. It's just like 1%.
Well, dude, but it goes back to the whole Patrice O'Neill had a bit about tsunamis, where it's like the tsunami wave coming doesn't even look like it's that big. Like you just think you need to pull your pants up a little bit. And that's what a tsunami wave looks like in real life. And then that don't look like, the day after tomorrow or whatever. That doesn't look like an impressive wave coming to kill me. And then it just slowly creeps up on you and just infests all the parking garages, and cars start floating into you and smashing your body against the walls, and you're dead in a deluge. It doesn't look impressive, and then just whoosh, it just ruins you.
I think there's a inherent bias in human beings that like once casualties or numbers in general, but certainly when you're talking about deaths, once they get big enough, we just have no frame of reference, and so we just kind of check out. And like I'll cop to that, like genocide is terrible, but I just have no way to even relate to the scale of millions of people dying. Like that's a level of tragedy that is outside of what my mind can conjure.
Okay, I'll help you. Yeah. I'll help you real quick. So let's say you're driving down the 405 and there is no one there.
I'd be so happy, Ron. Don't make me feel that happy about genocide.
That's a horrific example. I could be to the Museum of Tolerance in 10 minutes. What are you talking about?
But it's also like you go in every building, you try to get a burger at Burger King. There's nobody working at the Burger King. You got to go make your own burger. No. Okay. But that's the concept of literally an entire city is empty. It's insane. It's insane. But it is so big that it is hard to picture.
Well, and just like that's the stupid tsunami example I said earlier. It was just like when they said that like 180,000 people died in the tsunami. What does that mean? The average dude who's trying to juggle, trying to put his baby's diaper on and that thing in the bathroom. What does 180,000 such and such deaths from some other country mean to that guy in that moment? It's like less than nothing almost.
Well, and I think where it becomes cynical is where, creators sort of use that to their advantage. And I think that goes back to where you started, Ron, that idea of like a character can essentially commit genocide and still be forgiven because the people writing and producing something like that know inherently as a person, you're already much more checked out than if you would have just seen that guy crush a baby with his bare hands. I mean, you watch Vegeta like pick up a baby by the head and squeeze that baby's head until it pops. You're not going to want to root for Vegeta.
Nope.
Yeah.
But like you see him punch through a planet and the planet vaporizes and all 8 billion people on the planet die. Meh. You know what I mean? It's just, there's just something about that.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I just, now I want a therapist on this or a psychologist who knows why this exists. I'm just, it's so interesting to me because
it's the graduation of all the regrets that we have as people. Like a human being has a regret that he never did X or never proposed to this person or never did this or never completed this degree or whatever. And when they're writing a story, they don't go write a story about a guy who didn't finish his degree. They write a story about a dude who murdered a bunch of people. And then they go to the as Bill likes to say, the apotheosis of that idea. Like, how can I make this the best distillation and the largest perception of this idea? And it is like a planetary genocide or takeover plans that are for full whole planets and all that kind of stuff. It makes it a fun adventure romp rather than genocide when it gets that big. So, did you have any other genocidal characters, Ron, besides Loki and Vegeta that you really, or like? I know you're a big Wolverine and not Sabretooth, but like
Wolverine definitely is one of those guys who's killed like a bazillion people in his past. Now, admittedly, he was brainwashed, but even then, like, does anything make up for that? Like, I just don't know.
That's just another one of those convenient fictionalized outs. Right?
Yeah.
It's a little bit like, don't worry about that. It was all the drugs. You know, it's like, well, really?
Yeah, I mean, I like The Punisher. I think The Punisher is another example. That's one of Ed's favorite, and I think we should have Ed talk about that a little bit.
Well, I mean, dude, I've been thinking about it for so long that it's too huge in my mind. But the salient points are, I think right now, John Wick is eating the Punisher's lunch. And I'm weirded out by that because if you think about it, as far as if you're going to watch an entertainment product that has one human being shooting the shit out of a bunch of other human beings, for whatever reason, the reason of I'm a super dope assassin with gold under my dog bed isn't as good as I am a relentless killing machine because everything that I love was taken from me. To me, that's a totally different vibe, and I get that they're doing that. Everything he loved was taken from him, but he was a guy who took everything that other people loved and not in any goofy ass war with any sort of ethos. Obviously, we know that murder is murder, but in war, there are certain, things you got to do. And so he murdered people strictly in war, comes back, has a murder put on him, and he uses the tools of war to get at these people who did that. And a key ingredient in the Punisher mythos that I always thought was better than any assassin story was that he always went after high value targets, even as far back as the 80s. It was never, hey, there's a bunch of dudes around the fucking boombox. Let's do a drive by real quick. The Punisher never did no bullshit like that. He had more evidence than a Batman and 5 cops before he would murder your ass. And he would do it with this. He would go after high value targets. 15 dudes. There's a rocket launcher in there. There's 100 guns and 15 dudes milling about. And he would take that place down and then take all their money and buy more guns for him to, you know what I'm saying? It's just like, it was kind of Bill's thing of wanting to die. If I have all this fucking skill inside me, I have millions of dollars of skills loaded onto my frame, and I have nothing in my life but hatred for the people and the type of people who took that from me. What are you gonna do? It's almost like, to me, for that character, he chooses to just shut off the rest of life. Punisher has no girlfriends. Punisher has no martinis with some chick playing baccarat. He's working out because he's getting old. He got a knee brace on. He's working out, doing Muay Thai, punching frozen stuff like Stallone, and getting ready to keep this continuous war going until he eventually dies. That's it. That's all. And I understand how people can say that's some weird hollow character, but to me, it's very compelling that somebody would like give their life to that because they, of all those factors.
I think the tightrope you have to walk with a character like that, and with that character specifically, is that you sort of you have to always keep in mind that it's a tragedy. And I think that, where you see this go off the rails with the Punisher is where it becomes sort of a wish fulfillment.
Exactly.
Right? And the Punisher becomes almost an aspirational character.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it's a little bit like, okay, you have crossed a weird line here.
Mm-hmm. And you see all that impassioned talking about the Punisher. I didn't once say about like, yeah, and he stabs people real good and he blows stuff up good. It was all about him and his like, yes, I'm sorry to interrupt, but like that's the part that gets me. Not all the problematic parts, frankly. I mean, obviously murder's problematic, but the most problematic parts don't appeal to me at all.
But I do think there is a gray area there that I'm actually relating back to Batman. And I think Batman's a good character that sort of straddles what you're talking about with what I was talking about with the ennui of the overprivileged, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Batman is a guy whose parents' death really didn't need to affect him the way that it did. And you could 100% look at Batman and be like, really? Like you are one of the richest people in the world with anything you could ever want right at your fingertips, including like a manservant who can do anything. And what you want to do is go out and like beat the shit out of people. Like that's really what you want to do with your life. And then I go, well, I certainly remember being a kid and being like, yup, that's what I want. and where that crosses with the Punisher is just that idea of like, the world will make sense when I force it to. And there are two types of people out there. There's good people who deserve to be protected, and there's bad people who deserve to have the shit beat out of them or worse. And the only way the world gets better is if the good people take it to the bad people. Like all of that is gross and wrong, and also I would almost argue inescapable for at least a certain type of American. I would consider I'm extraordinarily progressive and almost pacifistic in my advancing age. That's not how I felt when I was like a teenager. Like I legitimately bought into, God, it'd be so great if Batman was real. Like I didn't necessarily want people dying in the streets because the Punisher was gunning them down, but I certainly wouldn't mind if people were getting concussed and, a bunch of gang members getting CTE out there. And by the way, why was I worried about gang members? Like I lived in a freaking lily white suburb. No gang members cared about me. They posed no threat to my existence. But that's not what, conservative local news would have you believe.
Right.
And that's right. That's where I think that all this discussion about problematic characters sort of reveals a weird, deeper truth where it's like, it more so reveals like a lot of the shit that you're bringing to it. And I think where I got away from characters like Ed is talking about is I sort of, as I grew up, I realized how little they had to do with my life and the way I grew up. Like, it's one thing to connect to the Punisher if you're actually living in danger from criminals. It's quite another thing to be like, well, I come from an upper middle class family in a town where the crime rate is almost zero, but I'm over here worrying about a guy on the streets bringing vigilante justice to gang members. Like, come on, it just illuminates these weird sort of like gross parts of society and the self, and that's where I think this is an interesting conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with gangs, and knowing people who were in gangs and knowing people who've died in gangs. And it's so funny because as a kid, having been jumped a couple of times by some gang members who didn't understand what gangs are really about, because at the time it wasn't like a money making thing in Albuquerque. It was like we see this media stuff, and so we're gonna try to imitate what we think gangs are supposed to be. And so they didn't do it right. Now, like as I grew up, I just saw the sadness that as the more you learn about late stage capitalism and the fact that people become so desperate and they see no future, so they go to whatever future seems possible. And that's literally what those guys' futures were to them. That's what they had, and they went to it. And I can't blame them, because I know that if I was in the same situation, I would have done the same thing. I almost did, and I should not be allowed to be in a gang. But
For so many reasons.
Yeah.
Well, dude, but the point I think that is super missed in any sort of Punisher and the better parts of the Batman discourse are that I think when I see what the Punisher is doing, it's I don't know, man. There's not this bullying angle that a lot of people bring to it, because again, the stories that I read, he took on like very high value targets, and also stuff that Spider-Man and Daredevil weren't doing. Oh, there's white slavers right down here. Oh, Reed Richards is making a time machine over here. But like these girls for the Sudan have been trafficked over here in a big holding thing, and all you guys are swinging around doing everything, but I'm like handling the real stuff of the world. And especially when they started letting him do in the Mac stories, like slavers, super duper drug rings, even certain nuclear weapons being trafficked, where like all these other people didn't know what was going on, and like a Russian guy has a random nuclear weapon, all these different things that the Punisher used to run into. I just thought that they were like more, it was as though you didn't have the resources of Batman, and you didn't have the code of not killing, and you had almost all the realistic versions of Batman skills: infiltration, surveillance, evidence gathering, super kick-ass physical combatant, bunch of toys. I always looked at Batman as like the Fisher Price version of the Punisher. That's how I came at it, because it was like, yeah, to put the kid gloves all the way on everything that you could do if you were a trained. And I always love the reverence. I guess this is the Midwest in me coming out, but I love the reverence for just like Rambo, the reverence for what one ultra soldier can do to the average populace. I respect the shit out of that somebody would take those skills and do what he did with them. You know what I'm saying? Rather than let the horrors of his life break him. He broke bad. He broke in a way that was proactive. And I said it before, I say it again. If the Punisher was a real character, he'd be the most interesting thing that ever happened on this planet. He is a guy who killed the guys who killed his wife and kids, and kept doing it, got caught several times, put into maximum security prisons. He always breaks out and continues to murder fools. And he's done it since the late 80s. Or rather, since the early 80s in this world. I always wanted to see a Punisher movie that took place in the 80s in his heyday, because a Vietnam veteran in the 80s was a bad motor scooter. You're only about 35, 40. You're ready to rock. Now, 1983, you're ready to kick some fucking ass. So anyway, all that to say, that's kind of my Punisher, the one that I see. Not the one on the back of cop cars because they're too lazy to do actual investigations. I read pages of Punisher investigating people.
Yeah, listen, I think that also touches on my whole, ennui of the privileged thing. One of the great things about Batman, and I think this applies to this conception of the Punisher that you're talking about, is it is a real answer to nihilism. It's kind of that Nietzschean ideal, right? Where when you are born into a world that you cannot control and doesn't make sense and is inherently, unjust or unfair, you must create yourself into something that forces a morality on the world. And for better or for worse, I do think that is a valid answer to the problem of ennui, right? Like, just realize that in the meaninglessness of your life, you have the ability to build meaning. And like Batman and the Punisher take that to an extraordinarily extreme degree, but
Mhm.
it is still an answer, and it is still something worth considering. And that's why I do see value in both characters.
Yeah.
I do think that there might be a better answer to the problem of ennui in American Beauty, where the problem of a world of meaningless, solving the problem of meaninglessness is more about recognizing the beauty and transcendence of your everyday life, might be a better answer than taking an unholy mission to go murder crime. But I like the fact that they both offer answers, and they're very diametrically opposed answers. But like, again, that's where I find value in these things, even if I know it's problematic.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, and also, I mean, if you're thinking about the best stories of both of these characters, the best stories of Batman and the best stories of the Punisher are not when, they're knocking out a mugger. That's never the best stories of those two characters. It's when they're stopping people who are literally murdering children and are literally, ruining neighborhoods and et cetera, et cetera. Like really stopping bad guys who are bad guys type of stuff.
Well, and what
So
you mean by ruining neighborhoods is like smashing them with a big giant machine
that
or
is,
whatever. Like, you know what I
yes,
mean?
that's what I'm talking about. Yes. I'm not
it's
talking about like your local drug dealer who
well, I mean,
arguably is not great doing his job, but is also like probably not a guy who needs to get murdered.
but to me, just really quickly, it's just a crisis of imagination for these people. Because, like I said, you remember I used to do that Batman bit. It's on Laugh Factory's thing right now. I'm talking about Batman, getting dressed up at night to beat up, poor people, blah blah. And when you really look at the best of the comics, though, that's I had to like almost rescind it in my mind. The best of the comics are not that. And the fact that we've let that be the conception because of maybe some parts of the Nolan verse and some parts of some people's apocryphal rememberings of the type of stuff Batman did. But in the best of the best of the best stories, he's not picking on anybody. He's punching up in the best way because he's got no powers. He's trying to fight whole gangs. He's got no powers. He's trying to stop this dude from making the fish smile and everybody be poisoned. He's trying to stop an immortal dude with an army of ninjas. What kind of check can you write to solve that problem? His privilege has nothing to do with solving that because it's a fictional reality and they fictionalized enough of it for it to have kind of nothing to do with what we do. And obviously, in the comic books, they've had since forever him doing charitable crap and giving away money and blah, blah, blah. So it's like, I feel like people have a dearth of imagination because they want to impress actual like life upon certain aspects of fictional stuff, but I do it too, so I get the compunction. I hate Forrest Gump for what it literally says about like just keep your head down, run in a straight line, do what everybody says, and you'll get rich and you'll get Apple stock.
Well, let's talk about the important part. This is fiction. And while you should analyze your fiction deeply, I think that it's important. It's also good to realize that Vegeta hasn't actually murdered anybody, and neither has the Punisher or Batman. They've done it in comic books, and those people weren't real. And in most of those stories, they're telling a different story. And sure, it's an adventure story, but usually there's some kind of theme, and there's a point to the character, and there's some sort of metaphor that they have something to do with. I mean, Vegeta's arc is that he was basically raised by someone who taught him to be a killer, and he was able to not become a killer. In the basic story of that is when you're raised by shitty people, this is for me why I relate. When you're raised by shitty people, it does not mean you're a shitty person. You can make decisions that are better decisions and become a better person. And you can tell that story in plenty of ways. You can tell it in a real way that's more like a family drama. Or you could tell it with a guy who can, punch a moon into another planet.
Well, but the villain to hero pipeline is well worn, right?
Yeah.
We kind of love that,
Yeah.
and it's part of our Billy the Kid obsession or whatever. And John Dillinger gave me a nickel, so he has my undying loyalty. The type of crap we do in America for our hero worship of some of these characters. But I'm just saying, like Vegeta and people who have all of this mass murder stuff. Like we were talking about, the numbers obscure their crimes, and we want to do stories of redemption. And I one of the last things I like about the Punisher is he gets none. He gets no redemption. There's
That's
no
true.
redemption in that. Nobody thinks the Punisher's a really great guy. Nobody's slapping him 5. And the people that are slapping him 5, he has to usually kill them because they've bought into the wrong part of his stuff. She's shot up cops that have done that. He shot up all types of imitators to the throne, trying to be like the Punisher. He's really dissuaded a lot of people violently from trying to trod his path. So it's just like I think Batman, on the other hand, is drafting fools. He got to draft like the NBA. Like, okay, whose parents died? Give me Lucky 7. Oh, this guy's got acrobatic skills. Oh, give me that kid. All right, next year, everybody's parents die around him, and he just goes to the casino and bets on these kids. You know what I mean? So it's like I always like the Punisher more for that. Like so many people tried to join the Punisher, and he let a couple of them join him one time. They like instantly got killed, and he was like, never again. You know what I mean? I always love that part of the so-called realism. That was maybe my wish fulfillment, was that when you get your wish to be an undying killer of men, and when you're an edgy teenager, I'm sorry, that's part of it. And we're all got gray hairs in our beard, and we talk about John Wick. To me, it's the same shit. It's the same shit. Give somebody this reason to identify with somebody who literally can't be stopped. Not because they can't be stopped, because they won't be. They refuse. And that character is popular as hell, and it always will be. And I'm just saying, like, morally, I was so on board for like, this guy don't even get no pussy, dog. He's just all about murdering people. He doesn't do anything. He's got so much money. And he's got money. He seizes drugs, never snorts a line. This guy has no life. There were so many books that were about the ephemera of what the Punisher would do. He shined up guns and prepared them for stuff. Prepared the knives that shoot out of the handle of the knife, so it's it's its own projectile. Crossbow oiling. He's doing that all day. He's got no life. He's just dedicated to this, and it's like this monk psychotic thing that I was like, damn, dude, he's not just freewheeling, having a good time murdering people like Deadpool or like a lot of these people that people like. He's solely focused with he eats a certain amount of macros. He measures his macros so he can stay lean and mean to be this machine as he ages to fight these dudes. He works out more than Joe Rogan. This guy is nuts. I don't know what to admit, oh boy.
And he's not 5'3", so he's got over Joe Rogan too.
There you go.
It's all self-actualization, though. I mean, if I could
That's
pin down
right.
something
there you go.
that I think goes around with all of ours, right? Whether it's overcoming your own sordid past, whether it's beating a line toward justice, no matter who or what stands in your way or what limitations you face, or overcoming sort of the inherent meaninglessness of life, the answer is self-actualization. And I think we can all connect to stories of people who find a way to be their best, most true self, even in the most despicable circumstances. And so, if that's problematic, we're going to like it anyway, I think is the takeaway from this show.
Absolutely. Well, I think that is a perfect place to wrap up. If you liked this conversation and you want to get even more deeper into our personalities, you can check out our Patreon. We will give you extra podcasts and art that comes directly to your mailbox. All you have to do is go to patreon.com/thegreatestpod, sign up for whatever tier you want, and then you can get those really more extra personal podcasts that get you even deeper than we got today, if you can imagine it. So, thank you as always for listening to The Greatest Pod.